So hello everybody, it is Friday, so it's time for another DAX Fridays, a new DAX function every Friday. In today's DAX Fridays, we're actually going to talk about filter context and row context. I haven't done a video on that. It deserves a video for sure, yeah, I have to say this, I've taught myself DAX, so I hope my way of explaining it is not too unorthodox, okay? So, first of all, let's get this right away. Context in DAX is not difficult at all. To understand context is super easy. What is difficult though is to modify it so it does what you want it to do. Okay? So this is important. You are going to understand what context is. You probably know what context is already. What you're having trouble with is modifying it or understanding what happens when you're putting things into your canvas or into your measures. With that said, let's begin. You probably hear about filter context and row context. Sometimes you probably hear about query context. If you go to DAX reference library in Microsoft, they have both three. They have both filter context, row context, and query context. I'll try to explain. The query context is not very used, so probably that's why you might not have heard of it before. So I also recommend you to check my first DAX 101 video, just to get you started into this. Okay, so let's start with filter context. So if I put, this is the Northwind dataset that we always use, okay? So if I put, this is a measure. If I put a measure that calculates the sales for the Northwind dataset into my canvas and nothing else is there, it gives us a number. It says 1 million in sales. Probably if we don't wrap that category label, data label, if we put that in million, in thousands, or in none, we have 1.3 million in sales. So that little measure, that little formula in there gave us a number. Great. As I explained on the first video, one measure can give you hundreds of results, depending on what filters you apply to it. And that is the filter context, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Is the filters that are applied to your calculations that make it change. Okay? It is as easy as that. I mean, seriously. So there you have your measure. If I now go to the product table and put into a table and put the product name, where are you, my dear? I have it there. So now we have product name in there. This same measure gave us different results for products. And again, if you're using pivot tables in Excel, this is intuitive to you. Obviously, the measure is going through the list of products and giving us the sales by product. And at the end, we get the exact same value that we had before for the total, which makes sense. Which makes absolutely perfectly sense. Now, think about one thing here. The product name is in another table. You have here product. This is where the orders and the sales, the sum of sales is stored for, where the actual sales are. And as you can see, I could, access a field from another table, put it into the measure for the sum of sales, and it gave us a result. Why? Well, because there is a relationship between both tables. If I would have removed this relationship, what do you see there? You see the same value for all products. Why do you see that? Well, if you remember, when I put the sum of sales in there as a card, it is 1.3, again, please give me the total number, 1.3 million in sales, right? And this is exactly the number that you see here. What happens? Power BI, in this case DAX, cannot access the product table because there is no relationship between them. And because there is no relationship between them, it's given us the same number for the entire table. Okay, so if I go back here and I said, oh, product name should go with product name, product ID should go with product ID, we build a relationship with these two tables, then the measure sum of sales has actually access to the product table, which is amazing. And then it can calculate. What happened? Did I do something wrong? I put order ID. Well, no, order ID won't work. Let's put product ID. You see it there? And now we can see that we are getting the correct sales results. So think about it, because this is important. The relationships, your model, will affect the calculations too. So the filters that you apply to the measure, as well as the relationships, will have an effect on the solution, on what you are actually, the results of that measure. If I put from category here, make it a slicer, and then I'm going to pick dairy products. Again, this is a column from another table that is the exact same measure is giving us different results, which is intuitive, right? You know that. The part that is probably less intuitive is the actual model, how relationships or how filters flow between tables. And filters flow in the direction of the arrow. So it goes from here to there and from there to there. And if those relationships are incorrect, you won't get your results. That's why modeling is so important. Okay? So filter context is the filters applied to your canvas, plus the relationships that you have in your model that allow you to access, different fields. And there's one more. And this is the one that you play with every time you're doing DAX. And perhaps the one that people gets more attention for getting the model. If you get the model right, DAX becomes easy. I promise you that. So I have here a measure that it says sales queso cabrales, the Asturian infamous now, hopefully, queso cabrales. You have to try it. It's really good. So sales queso cabrales, which is the sum of sales for product name queso cabrales. Easy. So it says, give me sales for queso cabrales. What are you doing here? Think about it. You are telling the DAX engine exactly what you want. Here you're just putting things and you let DAX do the calculations. Here you're being specific. You're saying, hey, I just want to know the sales for queso cabrales. And if you put this one in there as a card, it's going to give you the sales for queso cabrales. No deal. This is easy for DAX. Let's put none. 13,000. Let's put this as a whole number. So we have 13,000 of sales for queso cabrales. Awesome. Works beautifully. Now, what happens if we start mixing things? What happens if I put sales queso cabrales into the product table, into the table where there is already a filter? So as you can see here, we get product name and then the exact same number on each row, which is the same number that we have with sales queso cabrales. So it's basically the same that it happened before. But this time, it's not the relationships that are giving us trouble. Let's look at it. First of all, and this is something that the Power BI team did by design, and it's good and it's bad. Let me explain. So sales queso cabrales is equal to calculate sales, and then you see here this product name. So this is syntax sugar, which means is that the Power BI team has created some simplified syntax for us to write. But what this is in reality, this translates to filter, and then all, and then product name, where product name equal to queso cabrales. That's really what's happening in the background. You don't see it. But when you write this, Power Query or Power DAX engine translated into this and executes that. Now, let's look at what it says here. It says filter all. It says filter all. Do you remember the all function? It is in here, all. And I have a video on all. So the all function, what it does is modified existing filters. You hear that? It modifies existing filters. Okay, let's go. Let's take a look at that. What is it modifying? So let me get rid of the pen. Or maybe not. So what filters are being applied here? Now I don't have a category name. Let's put a category name. Or we don't need to, actually. We don't need to put a category name. What filters have been applied for this specific measuring here? So we have this one. As I haven't chosen any category name, there's nothing in there. So this is a filter that has been applied. And this filter gets fed into our formula in here. So it says, hey, our customer wants to have the sales for this list of products. And then Calculate sees that and then says, wait a second. I have to ignore all products and put just queso cabrales. So Calculate, as you told them to do, is saying, okay, no, I don't want Alice, I want queso cabrales. I don't want this, substituted by queso cabrales. So it says in the table, in the virtual table in the background, everything is being substituted by queso cabrales, and that's why you are getting queso cabrales sales. Because that's what you told it. They said, ignore every product name you have, any, and put queso cabrales instead. And then you get 11,000. Okay? Now, think about it. This is the most important thing you need to do. Always think about the results that you get and try to understand why you're getting them. Not just like, oh, didn't work, I should do something else. Try why, what's going on that is giving you the wrong result, so the unexpected result. This is not a wrong result. It's actually giving you what you told him to do. It says, remove everything, give me just queso cabrales. And it's replacing the filter, the product name with product name queso cabrales. So you are modifying the filters that you see here from a filter within a formula. So the filter context, and this is very important now, we have all the factors. It is affected by the relationships between tables that allow you to put sales table together with product name or sales tables together with category, right? So relationships is one. Number two is all the things you put in the canvas. For example, like these and like that. And number three is whatever filters you put in your measures. So depending on what you're using in your measures, whatever you see here will change. And you have to know that. You have to know what effects your relationships have. The existing filters in here, you see them, that's not an issue. But what is going on with your measures? What are you telling DAX to do? And for DAX, you need to know your DAX functions. I'm sorry, but you have to. The key to DAX is not understanding context for me, is knowing your functions. Because if you want to work with inactive relationships, because your model doesn't allow you to create anything more, you need to know that there is a function called user relationships that allows you to activate them. If you need bidirectional relationships, but you heard that you shouldn't turn them only when needed, there is a cross-filter function that allows you to turn them on the fly. So if you know your functions, you will be able to modify DAX easier. It is still a lot of things that you need to know on how those functions are altering what you see and what you don't see. But again, filter context, is what filters are being applied to your model, to your functions, and what things do you have access to based on the relationships that you have. So if you have a relationship between these two tables, you will be able to access the product table too in a measure. If there is no relationship there, you can still access, but guess what? You need to know which function to use. Functions. You need to know your functions. It's super important. It's like how to do math without knowing the math table. You can't. You have to know it. You have to. Okay. So now we have filter context down, right? And filter context is easy. This is it. This is nothing else. The difficult part is to know what happens when you're putting in functions or when you're trying to do something else than what DAX engine does by default. So if we go to row context, and row context for me it was like, what? Oh dear. Row context, in easy words, row by row. Row by row calculations. That's it. Because by default, DAX does not do row by row. It does. It's a columnar database. Take my Vertipack series. It's a columnar database, so it does things in like this, not like that in Excel, okay? So if you want to do row by row, guess what? You have to know your DAX functions. Yes. But let me show you. I have now a simple table just to be able so you can see what's going on. So here we have product, we have sales, and we have discount. And works like in Excel. If you create a new column, there's a huge difference between new column and new measure. And this threw me off all the time at the beginning. All the time. I was lost because I was using them without understanding what was going on. That's why. And, you know, in Excel, you don't have new column and new measure. You do, you use powerbi, but without it, you don't. So if I want to have the total sales, you do sales. Do you see? I'm in a calculator column. When I start writing sales, it gives me the columns that I have available on the sales table. So it says here sales, and then it says minus sales discount. So we're going to calculate the sales minus discount over the actual sales, basically. You click on it and it does the calculation as we expected. Nothing weird, right? You know that by heart. It's like it goes row by row and then it has sales minus discount row by row, and that works beautifully because it is a calculated column. Calculated columns can do things row by row, which is the row context. But it can do things row by row. Now, what happens if I take these and I put it in a measure? Sales as measure. And we talk about this on the first video. Go and check it out. But you cannot put what is called naked columns, or what's called that, but I haven't heard it for a while, naked columns in a measure. So these things have to be wrapped around a function. Again, know your functions. So we want to do the sum of sales. So we put here sum, and then it says it only accepts a column reference. So with sum, you can only have one column, no more. So you need to divide these. You can see this in the documentation. And this will calculate the sum of sales, basically. Okay? Now, watch this. We go to a calculated column. Sum in a and we put the sum of sales So we're using a function in a calculated column. What's going on there? It's giving us, I did that all the time. When I was beginning in DAX, I did not understand the difference between calculated column and measure. And I was mixing everything and I would get this and it's like, why am I getting the same value? Not intuitive at all. It's just not. But why? Again, you have to know your sum. You have to know your functions. Sum does not do row by row. Sum X does row by row, but not sum. So if you put sum in a calculated column, it's not going to do the things row by row. It's just going to take the entire sales. It's going to give us everything. So 500 plus 200 plus 100 is 800, and it returns 800 on each row. Why? Because it cannot do things row by row. And calculated columns do things row by row. So you are like ignoring row by row. No, so sum is calculating the total sales, which is 800, and then the calculated column is going row by row and pasting 800. That's not what we want, right? There is a way to make this work. Obviously, there's you have to know your DAX functions. So if you put, we will talk about this in another video, but if you put calculate in there, suddenly it will work. You have to know your DAX functions. You have to know them just to be able to manipulate the standard behavior of Power Pivot to do what you want it to do. Okay? So row by row is the row filter. So when you want to do calculations row by row, you think row filter. When you do calculations row by row, you have to use functions that do calculations row by row. All the X functions do things row by row, for example. Okay? If you want to do row by row calculations, you can do them as a calculated column. You can do them as a measure if you use SumX, for example. Okay? So SumX introduces the row by row to the measures where there is no row by row calculations effort. So measures does things vertically and calculated columns does it row by row. And if you put functions into, oh my God, I'm going to give you, but you saw it. If you put a function that does not have row by row ability into a calculated column, it will give you the wrong result. But the concept is easy. Row context is row by row. If you need to do row by row calculations, you need to understand which DAX functions allow you to do that. Okay? And once you know that, you will be able to do the calculations. When it comes to measures, you have to think about, okay, what filters are being applied in here? Because in here, in a calculated column, you have the table that you have. I mean, things can get very complex depending on what you're trying to do, obviously, but this is an introduction to filter context. Filter context, what filters have been applied, how does my model look like? And the filter is filter in the canvas, and it's also the filter within your measures, which is obviously that is going to mess you up. Row context is row by row calculations. Okay. Oh my God, half an hour. I have to stop talking. It is Friday. Have a great Friday. I will see you again on Monday with another video. So until then, enjoy your weekend. Bye.